the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Oxford. I am Gwendolyn Fringer, your service leader and one of your speakers for today. Whether you are a long-time member or a first-time visitor, we welcome you here. Come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. You are welcome here no matter your age, your size, the color of your hair, your skin, or your eyes. Come, whatever your abilities, whomever you love. We come together for worship, which for us as Unitarian Universalists is defined as giving honor, reverence, and regard to something. In our congregation, worship does not refer to or adoration, but more often to reverence and gratitude for the wonder of nature and of being. Upholding our shared values, we come together today to celebrate our interdependence and honor the spirit of generosity, all of which is centered in love. It is good to be together in this pluralistic community, this congregation, to wake now to compassion and conscience as we work toward a planet transformed by our care. Move on to announcements now. As always, please remember to write your griefs, gratitudes, and growths in advance to be put in the collection basket during the offertory. Information on Oxford's farmers markets can be found in your insert, along with community events taking place this September. Those include Mississippi Remembers, Black Student Resistance and Community Memorialization, which is from September 5th to 7th, and then a picnic and rally for democracy on September 1st, that's tomorrow, from 11 to 12. Materials on these things can be found on the table near the entrance. Also, there's an interest meeting for OWL, which is Our Whole Lives, on September 10th from 7 to 8 p.m. due to our August interest meeting being so well attended. Our Whole Lives lifespan sexuality education is for all ages, so invite friends and neighbors you think might have an interest in learning more, as this is a community-facing program that isn't just for UUCO. Adult programming is available this fall with children and youth programming starting in spring, depending on the level of interest. If you hope to see some familiar faces there, don't worry, I'll be attending. Please see our weekly newsletter or the insert in your programs for more information on them. And then I would like Wendy Fringer, my mother, to come and talk to us about the D&D program or game
stuff.
Well, she kind of took it all. So just so you know, we will have children's programming this fall in religious exploration classes. That's going to take a few different forms because we have different kinds of interest and age groups. The first piece is going to be the D&D campaign that is a homebrew kind of values-informed D&D, but it's going to be lots of fighting and all that kind of stuff. So if you like Dungeons and Dragons, I'm sure this whole audience does. This is really aimed, though, at 4th to 6th graders, and it is not specifically UU. So if you have youth in your life that have wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, maybe they've done it before, maybe they're new to it, they are very welcome to join us. Our opening session will be next Sunday. It'll take the whole service plus a little time afterwards because we want to make sure they have time to really build their characters and get going. So it's called Bergville Shadow of the Dark Lich. So if you have 4th to 6th graders in your life, maybe a 7th grader who just really wants to do it, please encourage them to show up next week. They can contact me because we're going to be sending out details and information on all that stuff. The other thing we're going to have is Faith Quest once a month. That'll be all ages youth. Each time the session will be built around a question that is pertinent to kids and to UUs, and it'll be a more explicitly UU-oriented thing. We'll be doing games to kind of explore those questions with reflection afterwards, but there'll always be kind of an instructional piece at the beginning. So that's RE. We have registration available here in the lobby. People are getting emails. Please encourage your folks to register. It helps us plan snacks especially. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. One more announcement. I know Michelle Harvey sent out an email looking to set up hospitality for the next month or so. Michelle, do you have any comments or encouragements?
We are trying to clean the list. I know some people wanted to be on it and aren't. Some people didn't want to be on it and are. So we're trying to make sure you're on the list, you want to be on the list, and then we'll set a schedule for the month of September. Yes. So some of you have already responded, told me when you're available and not, but if you haven't let me know that you want to be part of hospitality, just let me know.
Yeah. It's a very easy way to do, just contribute something to this congregation, whether you're doing a greeter. Greeter's literally the easiest thing you could possibly do. You stand there and hand out things and say hi to people. That's a wonderful way to meet the congregation as well. But we have other roles, all of them equally easy. So it's a nice way to be part of this congregation. All right. Any other announcements that I'm not aware of? All right. My name is Andrew Fringer. Now it's time for Greet Your Neighbor. I was going to jump into the call to worship. As Spirit calls us into community, let us offer one another a gesture of greeting. You're invited to share a moment with the folks around you. Extend a hand in peace, offer a hug, or perhaps a word of welcome. As a practice of consent, if you are kind of like more of an introvert and don't want to get involved, just put your hand over your heart or go like this, and we will respect your choice. And now please turn to the person on your right or your left, and briefly greet your neighbor. Don't make me do it again. Thank you. And now come, you who are weary, and you who are strong. Come, you who are joyful, and you who carry sorrow. The circle of friends around our chalice is wide enough for every story, for every song. This is a place where hearts can rest and spirits can rise. Here we sing of hope, we sing of courage, and we practice the art of being human together. Let us enter this hour with openness and gratitude, ready to be surprised by beauty and strengthened by our time together. Gwen will help us light the chalice.
Let us light this chalice with the words of Sophocles' poem on music. By memory's daughters, the muses, forgetting, named Lete, is hated and not to be loved. Oh, for mortals, what power there is in songs. What greatest happiness that can make bearable this short, narrow channel of life. Please rise now in body and spirit and join us in singing the opening hymn, number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
We all know this one, it's the last part. My life is all in endless song. Okay, ready?
Thank
Our Time for All Ages is a story today by Hans Christian Andersen. There was once an emperor of China, and he lived in a beautiful porcelain palace. It was fragile and beautiful, and he was proud of his ability to keep it. He also had a beautiful garden, and that garden had lots of exotic plants in it, and they were very, very precious, and his gardeners had to be very careful in tending them, and the emperor was very proud that he was able to maintain this garden. Now, one day the emperor received a letter from the emperor of China, or of Japan, and the emperor of Japan said, I have heard of your beautiful palace. I have heard of your beautiful garden. These are amazing things. These are wonders. But I've also heard that you have a bird in your garden down by the shore, and it sings amazingly. You are so fortunate to have such a bird, this nightingale. And the emperor of China thought, what nightingale? I've never heard this bird before. I don't know about this bird. Why has no one told me about this bird? So he sent his gardeners out to look for the bird, and none of them could find it. They were busy thinking about plants when they were out there, not birds. He put the word out and said, does anyone know about this nightingale? The emperor of Japan knows, and I don't know, and it's my garden, my bird. And they found a little girl who worked in the kitchen, and she said, I know this bird. I bring scraps from the kitchen to my mother in her home. And at night, I walk down there and bring the food, and I hear this bird sometimes. I know what it looks like. I can help you. So the little girl showed them where the bird was, and they asked the bird, will you come back to the palace and sing for the emperor? And the nightingale said, yes, of course I'll do that. So the bird came with the people back, and the little girl was allowed to stand in a corner and listen while it performed for the emperor. And so they got it ready, and the emperor looked at it and said, are you sure you got the right bird? This bird is kind of gray. He's not very interesting to look at. Like, is this right? But as soon as the bird began to sing, the emperor knew that it was indeed the nightingale, because its song was exquisite. Everyone was in wonder. And so the emperor said to the bird, I would like you to sing always for me. And he gave the bird 12 beautiful ribbons of all different colors and tied them to the bird and put the bird in a beautiful cage. And the bird was allowed 3 times a day to go out on the grounds, but the emperor's most important cabinet members would hold those ribbons to make sure the bird didn't escape. And the nightingale performed every day, 3-4 times a day for the emperor, and the emperor was very pleased. And he wrote back to the emperor of Japan, and he said, I do indeed have the nightingale. He sings in my palace of porcelain. He is indeed an impressive bird. Well, the emperor of Japan wanted to endear himself further to the emperor of China, so he sent him a beautiful automaton nightingale, a robot. It was made of gold. It had eyes of jewels. And when it was opened, the emperor of China was very impressed at the gift. But he was even more impressed when they made the bird sing, because it could sing. It could sing exactly one of the nightingale's songs, and perfectly, every time exactly the same way. Everyone in the court was amazed. And while they were amazed, the nightingale itself flew out the window, back to the garden. Now, at first, the emperor was a little bit upset. It seemed disrespectful, but he thought, I have this more beautiful version of the nightingale. And so he played his beautiful artificial nightingale every day, multiple times a day, as many times as he wanted he could have it played, until one day it broke. And his mechanic tinkered with it and tried to fix it, but he said, you can't play it more than once a day, because otherwise it'll break again. So after this, they were very careful. Now, the emperor of China began to fall ill. No one knew the cause, but he just wasn't interested in anything anymore. He lay in his bed all day. The only thing he looked forward to was once a day when he could hear his nightingale play. And everyone in the land worried. They thought, he's dying. He's leaving us. All the best doctors came. Nothing would fix it. And the nightingale that had escaped heard of this, and he thought, I will do a good deed. One more time before he dies, I will sing for him from his window. And so he returned to the palace, and he snuck in at night when no one could see him but the emperor, and he sang once again. And the emperor, who hadn't talked in days, sat up in bed. And the nightingale said, I just wanted to say goodbye. And the emperor said, if you would sing to me, if you would only sing to me, I think I could make it. I think I could make it through this. And the nightingale said, well, I will do this for you, but only on one condition. Never put me in a cage again, and I'll come when I want, and I'll leave when I want. And I'll tell you stories of the people of your emperor, or of your empire, because you need to know that there's more than this palace, there's more than these gardens. You need to hear those stories. And the emperor said yes. And so with the help of the nightingale, he came back to life, he was healthy, and he ruled again, but this time a more wise and humble emperor than he had been before, because of the nightingale song. And that's our time for all ages.
Thank you, Wendy. Now we're going to sing. Those of you who are 40 and under can go to Spirit Play. Those of you who are over 40 have to stay. Teague, you're related, so you have to stay. I'm sorry. No takers? Okay. All right. Now a short reading to introduce our theme for the day, which is music and vulnerability, or the connection between music and our emotions. This reading comes to us from Boethius's On the Fundamentals of Music. So not on the Consolation of Philosophy like I usually do here. I went to one of his different texts. This is from the introduction, where he's kind of laying out why this is a subject worth investigating. It is common knowledge that song has many times calmed rages, and that it has often worked great wonders on the affections of bodies or minds. Who does not know that Pythagoras, by performing a spondy, restored a drunk adolescent of Taormina, incited by the sound of the Phrygian mode to a calmer and more composed state? One night, when a prostitute was closeted in the house of a rival, this frenzied youth wanted to set fire to the house. Pythagoras, being a night owl, was contemplating the courses of the heavens, as was his custom, when he learned that this youth, incited by the sound of the Phrygian mode, would not desist from his action in response to the many warnings of his friends. And so he ordered that the mode be changed, thereby tempering the dispositions of the frenzied youth to a state of absolute calm. To cite some similar examples briefly, Terpander and Arion of Methymna saved the citizens of Lesbos and Ionia from a very serious illness through the assistance of song. Moreover, by means of modes, Ismenias the Theban is said to have driven away all the distress of the many Boeotians, suffering the torments of sciatica. Now that would be pretty cool. Anyone out here who's suffering sciatica, you just have to listen to the right song, and it'll fix you. Similarly, it is said that Empedocles altered the mode of music making when an infuriated youth attacked one of his guests with a sword because his guest had condemned the youth's father by bringing an accusation. Thereby, Empedocles tempered the wrath of the youth. This capacity of the musical discipline had become so familiar in the doctrines of ancient philosophy that the Pythagoreans, when they wanted to relieve their daily concerns in sleep, employed certain melodies so that a mild and quiet slumber would fall upon them. Likewise, upon waking, they purged the stupor and confusion of sleep with certain other modes, for they knew that the whole structure of our soul and body has been joined by means of musical coalescence. For just as one's physical state affects feeling, so also the pulses of the heart are increased by disturbed state, affects the mind. Democritus is said to have related this to the physician Hippocrates, who came to treat Democritus when he was being held in custody by his fellow citizens because they thought he was mad. You think things are weird today? I mean, imagine. But to what purpose is all of this? So that there can be no doubt that the order of our soul and body seems to be related somehow through those same ratios, by which subsequent argument will demonstrate sets of pitches suitable for melody are joined together and united. Hence it happens that a sweet tune delights even infants, while a harsh and rough one will interrupt the pleasure of listening. Certainly people of every age and sex experience this. Although they may differ in their actions, they are nevertheless united as one in the pleasure of music. Someone who cannot sing well will nevertheless sing something to himself, not because the song that he sings affects him with particular satisfaction, but because those who express a kind of inborn sweetness from the soul, regardless of how it is expressed, find pleasure. Is it not equally evident that the passions of those fighting in battle are roused by the call of trumpets? Is it true that fury and wrath can be brought forth out of a peaceful state of mind? there is no doubt that a more temperate mode can calm the wrath or excessive desire of a troubled mind as well. How does it come about then that when someone voluntarily listens to a song with ears and mind, he is also involuntarily turned toward it in such a way that his body responds with motions somehow similar to the song heard? How does it happen that the mind itself, solely by means of memory, picks out some melody previously heard? From all of these accounts, it appears beyond doubt that music is so naturally united with us that we cannot be free from it, even when we so desire. And now I want to turn it over to Tycho Jenkins. I invited him because our theme is about music and expression, really. I invited him to compose a couple pieces and speak on them for us. So he's got his first piece now.
So this first piece will be a nocturne. Nocturnes are mostly in minor keys. They're supposed to evoke images of the evening or the nighttime. And my intention here, if I execute it correctly, you should hear the two hands sort of converse with each other. And you should feel the piece breathe. The tempo will increase and decrease in a good, sensible way that makes sense to the ear, and it's going to be smooth like a parametric curve with multiple derivatives versus straight lines and stuff where it's fast, slow, fast, slow. It should breathe. And I had a hard time thinking about how can I tie the theme of vulnerability into this. I just thought of the reason. So I've been up here probably over 100 times, right? Even though that's the case, I always feel a little bit nervous. Always feel a little bit vulnerable. It's never going to go away. That's just part of human nature. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it.
There are a lot of fond memories I look back on when I think of my old UU congregation in Youngstown, Ohio. To my younger eyes, the building was a labyrinthine playground. My friends and I made it our second home, darting the sanctuary into the many hallways as soon as we were dismissed from the service to engage in various antics before we were called into RE. I came to appreciate the sacred space of the sanctuary and the messages imparted by our minister more as the years went by, as I grew a bit older and a tad wiser. But one thing stayed the same. The feeling I got as the doors opened and the sounds of the morning prelude reached my ears. Our pianist, Marceline, was one of the most skilled musicians I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. She drew notes out of the piano in ways I never thought possible, her fingers flying and floating across the keys. And the resulting melodies stirred something primordial in me. I felt beyond myself when I listened to her play, beyond the sanctuary and beyond a Sunday morning. Live music is a unique art in the sense that it not only requires three participants, the composer, the performer, and the listener, or in Taiko's case, two, composer and performer, in the simplest of terms, but that the performer inevitably puts a little bit of themselves into the piece. Whether they're having a good day or a bad day or something in between, their relationship to the music changes. As a result, an attentive listener attunes to both the emotions of the composer and the player, and a connection is formed. Barriers between individuals thin and blur, and a fusion of feeling takes place. When we talk about interdependence in Unitarian Universalism, we're alluding to that beautiful, incomprehensible web of life in which everybody sits. If you pull one of the strings, it will affect another living thing, for better or for worse. Music is one of the gentlest ways of pulling on these strings, of reminding us of that connection we share with each other. The web is almost tangible when you notice your heart stirring in response to someone else's creation, someone else's performance, someone else's feelings made audible. You're aware suddenly of how close you are to those people. You appreciate music, and so do they. It makes your heart sing, just as it does for them. These shared experiences, whether they're as brief as a single G note, as fans of a recently revived rock band can tell you, I don't know that any of you know who that rock band is.
Who is the rock band?
My Chemical Romance.
My Chemical Romance.
Or as epic as a Baroque symphony, they unite everyone in the room. They transcend time and space. They remind us we are never alone, so long as we have music to listen to, because once upon a time, somebody felt like we did and put pen to paper, putting those feelings down in a language everybody could understand. Across the globe and across history, studies have shown that there are no cultures without practices recognizable as music and song. It's intrinsic to us, ingrained deep in our genetic material. Where this love of rhythm and melody comes from, I can't tell you, but it's clear that time and time again we come together to sing hymns, to listen to a favorite record, to turn up the radio in the car because music moves us. The hymns remain one of my favorite things about attending services, not just because of the words, but because of the opportunity to participate in the act of listening and performing with all of you. We perform the hymns as one, and we listen to Taiko play. When we listen to his next piece, later after my dad's homily, pay attention to how it makes you feel and consider what he felt when he wrote it. Consider what the person next to you might be feeling when they hear this, how it might be similar and how it might be different from how you feel. Pick out those nuances if you can. Notice that piece of web Taiko tugs at when he plays. And think about the connection to us he's formed by sharing this part of himself with the congregation. Leave this place thinking about the music, when music needs lyrics, and when just the notes themselves transcend spoken and written word.
Thank you, Gwen. Here at UUCO, we live our values in part through our generosity. Share the Plate donations are split 50-50, with half going to our monthly designee and half going to UUCO. This month's recipient is Doors of Hope Transition Ministries. The purpose of Doors of Hope Transition Ministries includes but is not limited to guiding homeless families and at-risk families in Lafayette County, Mississippi, toward self-reliance and stability through a holistic, individualized approach that includes life skills training, mentoring, and supportive housing. It's one of our favorites, which is why we give to them at least once a year. We hope you give generously. let us enter into the ritual, like the one before us, to share what is on our hearts and lay it at the altar of community and spirit. Using a pebble dropped into a bowl of water symbolizes the ripple effect of the events in our lives upon the larger community, and we will now share the grief, gratitude, and growth moments that have touched our lives since we were last together. Our first pebble is one of gratitude for our visitors and friends. Well-oiled machine. Thank you for the opportunity to gather here today. This one comes from Michelle Harvey. It is a gratitude. I am extremely grateful that we have the Fringers in our congregation. Everywhere you look, a Fringer is lovingly supporting UUCO. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, on that note, it's probably worth noting, here's a joy. We recently have switched up our office administrator position, and Gwendolyn is stepping in for an interim spot. So yeah, give that. Very nice. This is from Adrian. Because of the new anti-DEI law, the University of Mississippi has stopped to release student activity fee to student groups. So this would be a grief. We're aware of this, especially because of the Pride Festival and the Pride Parade. We've lost, obviously, funding and support for that, and the community now has to do all of that. So that's definitely a problem. I have one joy to share. My daughter Elsa is up at a jazz festival in Detroit with her friends and her friend's family, and she took a moment to explain to her friend's father that she doesn't quite understand jazz, which I think he took poorly. And then she listened to him explain why jazz is cool and interesting, and I really like the openness of Elsa for going to this place that makes her uncomfortable, listening to something that she doesn't understand, but still being open to it. And that's really nice. All right. And yes, please do.
I'm sorry, we didn't get here in time to write something down. We went to our daughter's wedding a couple of weeks ago, and Libby grew up in this service here, and it was so nice. They did all their own everything. They organized it all. And she worked the challenge and so many UU principles into their wedding choir.
That's beautiful.
And this was for all these Mormons and Catholics and everybody. And so
Yeah.
it was really nice to see this spread around.
That's really wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else have a quick share? Finally, we will drop a pebble into the water for all the grief, gratitude, and growth moments that remain unspoken. All that we hold in our hearts for ourselves, for each other, and for the world is held in the community and by a love that is limitless. Amen and blessed be. And now, speaking of that jazz festival, while I was getting ready this morning, I was thinking of Elsa at the jazz festival, and we had already set the order of service and the readings. And then I thought of this story that I used to teach in the Intro to Literary Studies class called Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. And I thought, duh, that would have been like the perfect reading for today. So I pulled the section that was deeply moving to me. I used to read this out loud in class, and it was always a touching and emotional moment. So I'm going to have Gwen read it instead. Because I usually break up when I'm reading this part.
I might do it too.
Okay. So just for quick context, this is a story about a young man who is a teacher, and he's a young African American man. He's a teacher, and he's teaching in a neighborhood that's not so great. And he has a brother who is a musician, who has some struggles with drugs, and who is coming out of prison. And the brother there's a conflict between them. There's a tension between them, that one has chosen a life of stability and order, and the other more a life of chaos and freedom in some ways. And it's at the end, in this moment, where the teacher brother comes to see jazz music played by his recently freed brother, that he gets to understand what it is all about.
Then Creole stepped forward to remind them that what they were playing was the blues. He hit something in all of them. He hit something in me, myself, and the music tightened and deepened. Apprehension began to beat the air. Creole began to tell us what the blues were all about. They were not about anything very new. He and his boys up there were keeping it new at the risk of ruin, destruction, madness, and death in order to find new ways to make us listen. For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it must always be heard. There isn't any other tale to tell. It's the only light we've got in all this darkness. And this tale, according to that face, that body, those strong hands on those strings, has another aspect in every country and a new depth in every generation. Listen, Creole seemed to be saying, listen. Now these are Sonny's blues. He made the little black man on the drums know it, and the bright brown man on the horn. Creole wasn't trying any longer to get Sonny in the water. He was wishing him Godspeed. Then he stepped back very slowly, filling the air with the immense suggestion that Sonny speak for himself. Then they all gathered around Sonny, and Sonny played. Every now and again, one of them seemed to say, Amen. Sonny's fingers filled the air with life, his life, but that life contained so many others. And Sonny went all the way back. He really began with the spare, flat statement of the opening phrase of the song. Then he began to make it his. It was very beautiful because it wasn't hurried, and it was no longer a lament. I seemed to hear with what burning he had made it his, and what burning we had yet to make it ours, how we could cease lamenting. Freedom lurked around us, and I understood at last that he could help us to be free if we would listen, that he would never be free until we did. Yet that there was no battle in his face now. I heard what he had gone through, and would continue to go through until he came to rest in earth. He had made it his, that long line of which we knew only Mama and Daddy, and he was giving it back, as everything must be given back, so that passing through death it can live forever. I saw my mother's face again, and felt for the first time how the stones of the road she had walked on must have bruised her feet. I saw the moonlit road where my father's brother died, and it brought something else back to me, and it carried me past it. I saw my little girl again and felt Isabel's tears again, and I felt my own tears begin to rise. And I was yet aware that this was only a moment. The world waited outside as hungry as a tiger, and that trouble stretched above us, longer than the sky. Then it was over. Creole and Sonny let their breath out, both soaking wet and grinning. There was a lot of applause, and some of it was real. In the dark, the girl came by, and I asked her to take drinks to the bandstand. There was a long pause while they talked up there in the indigo light, and after a while I saw the girl put a scotch and milk up on the top of the piano for Sonny. He didn't seem to notice it, but just before they started playing again, he sipped from it and looked toward me and nodded. Then he put it back on top of the piano. For me, then, as they began to play again, it glowed and shook above my brother's head like the very cup of trembling.
Yeah. So, one of the remarkable things about music is how it slips past our defenses. You can listen to a story, you can listen to a cogent argument, you can even listen to a well-delivered sermon, and you can still resist. You can tune it out, you can nod and agree and then get on with your day, or you can cross your arms and say, I don't agree, and then get on with your day. But a song, a few bars of a good melody, a chord that falls in just the right place, or G notes, whatever you were talking about, suddenly we are undone. Emotions stir, and sometimes even tears come before we know why. I remember writing a letter to Wendy about something I called music chills back in high school when we were first getting to know each other, and we wrote a lot of letters back then, like a lot of letters. Even though we would see each other at lunchtime and then after school, still writing letters to each other. And I wanted to know if she also got these music chills, that shiver that comes down your spine when the right song hits at the right moment. And in those moments, it It always felt like my whole body was testifying to a deeper connection that the music had sparked. As I wrote in that letter, which probably exists somewhere in boxes, unless you threw it away.
It's in the attic.
It's in the attic.
Boxes.
As I wrote in that letter, these chills felt special, unlike the letters to her that she threw in the attic. Almost like a secret signal that the music and I shared. So while preparing for this service, I came across a study from 2005 that explored this very thing. Of course, I looked into chills, right? How music arouses chills. It is a real phenomenon. And the researchers found that chills are in fact quite rare, but they do happen. Out of dozens of people, sometimes only a handful would experience them during the same piece of music. That means it wasn't automatic and it's not universal. What gave me chills as a teenager might not have touched someone else. That made me think maybe I wasn't so strange for feeling them so strongly. Maybe I was just especially attuned at that moment to the way that the music was speaking to me. And that's, I think, an important reminder. Music does not land on us all in the same way. Each of us hears it through the filter of our own lives, through the moment that we're in, through our memories, our longings, our griefs, and our hopes. A single melody might sound lonely to one person, joyful to another, and bittersweet to a third. And what moves one heart to chills may pass lightly over another, inspire tears in yet another. That diversity is not a weakness, but part of the richness of human community. And I really like this observation, because it means that when we listen to music together, we are not sharing the same sounds necessarily. We are sharing the whole spectrum of responses. My chills, your smile, someone else's tears. They're all different, but they're all ways of being touched by the beauty. A little more on the chills and the studies on chills. This article showed also that chills aren't triggered by just any big noise or flashy sound. They tended to come at certain kinds of musical moments. When a new voice entered, when a harmony shifted towards resolution, when the music gently defied and then fulfilled our expectations. But most importantly, they weren't a reflex. They didn't happen the way that your knee jerks when you go to the doctor and they tap it, right? They came when listeners were paying attention, fully engaged, and open to being moved. And that's what stays with me, right? Chills, tears, and the other feelings that emerge when we hear music are a reminder that it doesn't just wash over us. To be changed by it, we have to bring ourselves into it, to bring our attention and our openness and our willingness to feel. Those chills that I felt in high school, and sometimes even today, the chills that the researchers have tried to map in the lab, they're just one doorway into this bigger mystery. They show us that music stirs something deeply personal, tied to our own openness and to our own attention. In the classes I teach now, I encourage students to approach a single topic from multiple disciplinary angles, to examine an issue or problem or idea through different lenses, because each perspective adds richness, nuance, and understanding. So preparing for this homily, I thought it wise to practice what I preach, and to look at music not only as a personal experience and not to explore it only through the one article or disciplinary perspective. And when we widen the lens, we begin to see that this vulnerability in and through music is not only personal, it is cultural, it is historical, it is spiritual, and many, many other things. Different disciplines, from anthropology to theology to neuroscience, help us glimpse how music has always carried human beings through these tender places of life. Anthropologists remind us that it is not just private but communal. Across cultures, music carries us through the most vulnerable moments: funerals, weddings, initiations, and protests. To sing together is to entrust our fragile voices to one another. If I break on a note, your voice holds me up. If I falter, the song continues. Vulnerability becomes strength when it is shared in this way. One could go on and dig into ethnographic studies of music's place within human societies, but I'll shift now to musicians and theorists, music theorists. They know that spaces of tension in music, dissonance, silence, and unresolved cadence are what pulls us in. It is the unfinished phrase, the trembling voice, the note that wavers before finding its home that affects us and cracks us open. Beauty lives not only in perfection, but also in those fragile moments where sound falters, where a harmony might clash, and yet somehow it all holds together. It's in that delicate uncertainty that music mirrors the human experience. It is there in those moments of intimate exposure, in an encounter between risk and resolution, that we are reminded of our own vulnerability and the profound feelings that music can stir within us. And of course, those of us who love history can see that people have always known this. St. Augustine confessed that he was sometimes overcome by the sweetness of the Psalms. He could become so vulnerable in these moments that he worried about losing himself in the music. I picked up Augustine's Confessions for this and was reading the parts on music, and I thought, this guy, Augustine has problems. Like, he really needed God to center him because, man, the way he talks about stuff. Centuries later, Hildegard von Bingen celebrated the very same sweetness, saying song could knit the soul back into harmony with heaven. I really like that idea, even if I don't believe in heaven. For her, music was not just an ornament or a ritual, it was a conduit, a medium through which the soul could open, soften, and be reshaped. It is a space of resonance. And so vulnerability through active engagement with music was not a weakness for her, but a threshold, an opening through which grace entered. That's a beautiful idea. But Augustine and Hildegard may be a little too Catholic for your UU tastes. So let me shift to something a little more historical that's more in our wheelhouse. Think about the anthems that are sung at civil rights marches, or the songs that rise up in protests around the globe. There we find voices trembling together, we find chants, and we find harmonies carrying hope and grief alike. But also think of that first time you heard a song that made you weep in a theater. How can you sit through something like Les Mis and not weep at the bishop's generous gift to Jean Valjean or Eponine's heart-wrenching On My Own? As a historian and a literary scholar, I am stirred by these moments, whether I am in a concert hall or whether I'm listening in my car or through my earbuds, because music like this connects me to a larger human story, sometimes one that I didn't necessarily know that I needed. And across time and across context, music invites us all to lean into our own openness, to experience emotions that might otherwise be kept at bay, and to recognize the same vulnerability and courage and beauty in one another. Psychologists tell us that music does this by reaching into our emotional core. It activates the same brain circuits that respond to love and to loss or longing. Neuroscientists can even see this in scans. Dopamine floods in, memories flare up, and the self becomes porous. To open ourselves to music is to risk being moved, sometimes in ways that we can't predict because we don't know which pores are going to open. So across disciplines, across traditions, a common truth emerges. And I like it. Music is not safe. Music disarms us. It makes us porous to joy, to grief, to one another, and to the sacred. And maybe that's exactly what we need. In a world that tempts us to armor up, music invites us to soften, to risk being moved, to let a note slip past our guard and remind us that we are human, fragile, resonant, and capable of harmony. Looking around, surveying recent research from different disciplines, I was also struck by some important studies that look more closely at how music moves between people. How the emotions carried in song don't just land in one heart, but ripple outward, contagious, connecting. This is where empathy enters the picture, and where the vulnerability of music becomes not only personal, but profoundly communal. I found several studies that that complicate some of our assumptions about the connection between music and empathy. One of them explored how playing music might affect one's ethical sensibilities. The researchers expected or began with the assumption that practicing an instrument, especially at an early age, might make the musician more open to emotions. And this would be especially true, they assumed, for women versus men. But the findings told a different story. It turns out that simply practicing music hours alone with a single instrument doesn't reliably make people more empathetic or more pro-social. And while women did tend to be more open in these studies, the differences were negligible. What did seem to matter was not the amount of practice, but the context. It was about how and when we make music. I came across several studies that complicate our assumptions about the link between music and empathy. And one of them talked about children. Children whose openness is already tender. And the assumption is that maybe we gain empathy when we start early. This proved not to be true as well. And what about adults? Again, the real difference in all of these studies seemed to be that it wasn't about solitary practice, but it was about being interactive and collaborative in music making. When people sing, when they drum or play together, synchronizing breath and rhythm and entrusting themselves to the group, it is in those moments that vulnerability is not a side effect, it is the ground of connection. And isn't that in its way a picture of our calling as Unitarian Universalists? We are not asked to practice our faith alone in private, hoping that hours of solitary work will shape us into more compassionate people, though that's tempting. We are invited instead into relationship, into community where our voices sometimes blend and sometimes clash, but where the music cannot be made without each of us. Just as in a song we risk bringing our imperfect selves, we lean into one another's timing, and we discover that harmony is possible only together. Our empathy and our pro-sociality, our capacity to care for one another, are not abstract ideals. They are practices like music making that require us to show up, to open up, and to trust that something larger than ourselves will hold us. There's another recent study with more than 3,000 participants, and it helps us see this even more clearly. This study distinguished between recognized emotions in music, that is what we hear a song expressing, and felt emotions, what we actually experience as listeners. And what was interesting about these studies is that those two things don't always line up. You can recognize that a piece of music sounds sad, and yet feel comfort, or nostalgia, or even joy when hearing it. What kind of things predicted these differences? Again, the answer seems to be empathy. The more empathetic the listener, or empathic, the more strongly they felt the music's emotional force. And when people listened to music they already loved, even sadness could be experienced as something vivid and life-affirming. This tells us something important, that music functions as a kind of emotional communication, a contagion, and that word kept coming up, an idea of contagiousness or contagion of feeling through music. It passes between performers and listeners, and even among the listeners themselves in a shared space. The vulnerability of opening ourselves to this transfer is what allows music to foster empathy. And when we sing or play together, we embody that vulnerability even more deeply. We entrust our voices, timing, and rhythm to the group, practicing trust and compassion in a way that words alone could never teach. The science reminds us that empathy is not a guaranteed outcome of any one practice. It grows in the spaces where we dare to open ourselves, where we risk our voice, our timing, and rhythms in the company of others. This is what we do here at UUCO, week by week, season after season. Like the composer, the performer, and the listener triangle that Gwen mentioned earlier, we come here to practice a kind of music making of the spirit. Each of us brings something of ourselves to the song. Our histories, our hopes, our griefs, our sorrows, our growths. And when we truly listen with attention, with vulnerability, the barriers between us begin to blur, and the fusion of feeling becomes possible. Just as a band learns to play together or a choir learns to breathe as one, so too we listen for each other's needs, to hold each other up when a voice falters, and to trust that together we can create something beautiful. This is the interdependent web made audible. Sometimes the harmonies are sweet, sometimes they are dissonant, but always they are shared. And so we keep practicing to entrust our voices to one another, to risk the opening that lets empathy grow, to make a music of the spirit that none of us could ever create alone. And with that in mind, I want to turn it over to Tycho for his final piece.
Yes, this is the last one. I'm going to use lots of impressionistic tools, so things that were found that you see used all the time, floating boards. That's F major 7. This is the sure itself. You can tell it's a major. It's also kind of sure itself. It's not so much. And that's basically, you'll hear a lot of that. It's going to be floaty. It's impression. You might not even notice the melody that's going to be.
What a treat it is to have you, Tycho. Last week I was doing tech. I was the tech guy last week, and I was sitting there like, what is this service I'm going to do next week about? Like, I don't even know. And it was going to be something completely different. And then I was listening to Tycho play music, and the idea occurred to me that we should talk about music. And then when he came in just to like check in after, I said, hey, what do you think about this idea of music and vulnerability and the connection between the music and emotions? Could you maybe prepare some Chopin or Beethoven or something? He said, no problem. And then partway through the week we checked in again. He's like, I've got my own pieces I'm going to do. And just what an incredible thing to have a musician who composes so beautifully and can also do it on the spot too. It's really great. So thank you, Tycho. All right. Let us leave the comfort of this hall today ready to be attentive to the melodies and rhythms around us. May we be ready and open to collaborate in that music. May we hear it, may we carry it into our homes, into our workplaces, and our neighborhoods. And may we be willing to be vulnerable, not only when we sing, but in the larger chorus of life. For it is in that vulnerability that we discover harmony, and in harmony that we discover hope. Let all of us here at UUCO be part of the music of compassion, of justice, and of love that drives our world forward. And now rise in body or spirit one more time for our closing hymn, where we get a chance to embody all that we've talked about here today, lending our voices to one another as we sing number 1064 in the blue hymnal. Blue Boat Home. This is the song that when Wendy and I first started attending a UU church in Manchester, Connecticut, this was one of the songs that made me think, maybe I am a UU.
It's definitely one of our favorites, at least it's one of my favorites.
Yes.
And we all know this one, it has this little intro there. We can just get right into doing all three verses.
Yeah, we'll do all three.
All right.
Thank you.
And if y'all will please remain standing for our community blessing. I think we all know it, but I'll say it anyway just one more time. Go in peace, believe in peace, create peace, be peace. All together. Go in peace, believe in peace, create peace, be peace.
Thank you, everyone.